and I got my Facebook back finally after it got hacked.
Oh,
So
I was
it's
like, are you in
Gary Edgington.
jail? Did you get yourself
Yeah,
in
it's a
Facebook jail?
no, major denial of service hack by a very sophisticated bad guy. He used to tell me stories about, because he was an engineman, so he was always working on the engines and everything. He said everything is built overbuilt.
Oh yeah.
Everything is way heavier than it needs to be.
Well, every time I pick one of those things up, I kick myself for complaining about having to carry my
Yeah,
M16 with the
yeah,
A1 with the handle on top.
yeah.
Like I should have never complained. Half of that thing is plastic composite.
I
This
know.
this thing right here in the corners is metal and steel and
Yeah,
iron. I mean,
exactly.
it's solid. So yeah, and I
Yeah.
got here in the corner. You can't see it, but I got a replica bazooka from like World War II.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's
that's pretty
really
neat.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the stuff, you know what, they made it all work, and nowadays we all panic if we can't have more than, 20 rounds or 30 rounds, and we won World War II with an 8-round Garand,
Yeah.
and a 15-round M1 carbine,
Yeah.
so
Which by the way, wasn't a quiet gun by any stretch of the
no,
imagination.
no,
I mean, the distinct
no,
sound that it makes,
yeah,
like by no means were we going out there, locked and
no,
loaded, packing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's remarkable to think of how we used to fight war,
exactly,
and
exactly,
and what it took to win a war. And
yeah,
you're looking at war now today, and it's it's automation, it's drones. They're saying then that the next war is actually going to be all online. That's
right,
where that's where it'll be. It'll be cyber
yep,
attacks. It'll be attacks on infrastructure and the
yep,
media, turning
yep,
well, China's already doing it, already
yep,
turning us against ourselves.
exactly,
With the
exactly.
propaganda campaigns. We were just talking about it at I had a China briefing at work
Oh, cool.
2 days ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was from a master sergeant that works at
Mhm.
the I can't remember what it's called. It's called Cassie. It's like the Chinese Aerospace Surveillance Institute or something like that.
Oh, wow,
Basically,
yeah.
his job is to him and his office. Their job is to like basically watch the propaganda machine that is
Sure.
China off of the SIPR network. So this is
Mhm.
all open source type of stuff,
Unclassed.
but yeah, but
Yep.
they can collect so much of that information and then
Right.
piece it together and hand it off to the guys who are doing the classified stuff, and they're just putting together this larger puzzle. And he's like, by by all means, China is already winning the war because
Right.
they're all over our TikTok, they're all over our social media
Yep.
campaigns. They're pinning us against each other. Like
Oh, yeah,
they're
totally.
already on that
Yeah.
level. Like it's not a
Yep.
conventional war. It's a war.
No.
It's a chess game.
No, it is, and, you know, I a friend of mine, I used to have a place up in Idaho, and, one of my neighbors was a, he was with, I worked at SOCON for a while, so
Yep.
this was, uh this was a Tier 1 Air Force, Special Tactics, what the hell is it called? Yeah, out of Hulbert, and he was a weapons
Oh,
officer.
okay.
And he ended up leaving that and became a drone pilot.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's it's so bizarre. It is
Yeah.
so bizarre. I don't know if you ever saw that movie that came out a few years ago that was about a drone. It was a British production. It was really well made, and it
Really.
was about a drone pilot and a British politician and a British one star female one star played by Helen Mirren, and it was about you know the the ethical um, decision of pulling the trigger and zapping some asshole,
Man, I want to
and
say I've heard about it, but I don't
it's
remember.
really good.
I'll
You'll
have to look it up.
you're Air Force, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would enjoy it. It's really really good. They have them in the trailers out in the middle of,
Yeah.
out in the desert where they're all at, doing their thing, and yeah, it's very strange. It's very very
Yeah.
weird.
I actually
But
work with a guy who used to be a drone operator,
Uh-huh.
and he tells me stuff all the time. I think he does it
Yeah.
as a way of therapy because he was back when they
Yeah.
first kicked off the drones. So they were in those boxes in the middle of the desert for days on end and horrible conditions, watching all
Yeah.
kinds of people die.
Yeah.
And he'll just tell me random stories. And again, I think it's a bit of a therapeutic type of thing for
I'm sure it
him.
is.
Um,
I
but
know
just
this guy
like
had problems,
the
and he ended up.
amount of
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that I mean that officer and that enlisted guy are sitting there next to each other, and they are just like this in lockstep, and the amount of
Yep.
information that they have to know to help them pilot that thing
Yeah.
is just it kind of it blows my mind every time he tells me a story about how they
Yeah.
target and how they collect the intel and how they work with the intel guys. And
Yep.
wow, it's a
And
whole new respect for it.
yeah, while I was at SOCOM, I had, everything at my desk, and one of them was the JSOC network, and I was able to watch when I was bored. I was able to watch live drone feeds. Oh my god! I didn't see anybody get wasted, but I saw some crazy shit. It
Oh
was
yeah,
pretty cool, man. It was
I'm
pretty.
sure. So
It was.
let's talk here for a second. You were at SOCOM, but before that, you
Mhm.
were L.A. or Los Angeles FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, right?
Yes, yes, and then
Okay.
I started out as a police officer at Manhattan Beach Police Department in 1979, and transferred to Beverly Hills and worked there for 6 years, and that's when I made detective, and then from there I basically worked investigative assignments to the rest of my career. Most of my career has been as an investigator or a manager and of investigators. And I ran the task. I worked in internal affairs. When I was at Beverly Hills, I worked on the Billionaire Boys Club case. I don't know
Cool.
if you heard about that.
I had, yeah.
Yeah, I worked on that case, and I was in the detective bureau. And when I was at the DA's office, I worked on the OJ Simpson case. And
Wow.
then I went over to major narcotics over at the California Department of Justice as a special agent, and then I worked uh, a drug diversion case, which is basically overprescribing of pharmaceuticals by medical professionals,
Hmm.
and on a very very famous, I won't divulge the name, but extremely famous Hollywood family. It was pretty crazy. I mean, it was like the amount of Percocet that was being prescribed would kill an elephant. I mean, it was like,
Wow.
it was 50, 60 Percocets a week, and you're only as a it was a dentist that was prescribing it. You were only supposed to prescribe a 48-hour supply by law, and he was doing that like you know every week. I can't even remember how many it was, but it was mind-boggling. You know,
Wow.
yeah. And then in 1999, I was working Intel and organized crime and Intel, and then uh, I worked over, and then I got selected to go over to the Joint Terrorism Task Force as our representative over there. So I worked there from 1999 until 2008, and in 2001, DOJ after 9/11 stood up. I was working internal affairs and you know, uh, and then on 9/11 we stood up eight. Um, eight, seven or eight task forces throughout California, and I was asked to put together and command the task force in Los Angeles for the Department of Justice. And so I had the area all the way from Monterey down to the Orange County, San Diego
Wow.
County line. And we went up to Vandenberg a few times to work with Air Force OSI on CI issues.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and then 2008, I retired and I deployed to Iraq as an embedded advisor with the Army, working with the 10th Mountain Division IED defeat cell.
Yeah, let's talk
And
more about that, and then I want to
yeah,
go back to
yeah,
Beverly Hills because I'm sure
sure,
you got some stories to tell about that. But yeah,
I
what
do.
was yeah, I have no doubt.
I
So
do.
what you deployed after you retired?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, and you were with the army. What did you do again?
I was embedded counterterrorism, organized crime advisor. I was a senior advisor, uh, working with an IED defeat cell at division headquarters,
Wow.
and I was there for about 5 months in the desert there at Victory Base at Camp Victory,
Okay.
and we used to go to slave there for chow at the Air Force Chow Hall because
There you go. Now you got it. You're making smart decisions at least.
exactly. Not enough, actually. Actually, that's in the book, by the way. That is
Is it?
actually in the book. Yeah, about going to the chow hall at Sather for because it had better food and you didn't eat on styrofoam with plastic spoons and forks and shit. I'd never been in the service. I'd been around it because of my dad and
Sure.
everything, but and he used to say, you know, that he said certain things like the hurry up and wait thing,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and the chicken shit stuff, and of course this was supposedly wartime military, but it's sure kind of in a way it seemed like more of a hybrid to me there at Victory Base.
Yeah.
They're so ticky tack and bizarre sometimes. It was just, like I remember, guys, the latrines are like, 40 yards away, 30, 40 yards in the middle of the night. You got to go take a piss. You have to go out of your hooch and walk over gravel to get to the latrine. So guys would take their bottles and piss in the bottles, their Gatorade bottles, and then throw them in the trash. And I guess the local whatever, the contractor, Indonesians or whatever, started complaining. So the command sergeant major for 10th Mountain Division, division commands, whatever the hell it is, division sergeant major, issues this edict. You will not do blah, 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 blah. And I'm like going, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? They're
It's the
shitting
thing.
in our showers, for Christ's sake. Is anybody
Right?
doing anything about that?
Exactly.
I had they at Victory we had we there was a Iraqi army compound there, and one time I'm going to go to PT, and I'm in a short and t-shirt and everything, and these knuckleheads drive out of the compound, getting ready to go on a convoy, and this one guy in a truck points a dishka with fully loaded. I could see I could see the belt in the action of the weapon, pointed it at me. And I'm in a t-shirt and shorts. I'm like, no threat to anybody. He fucking points this monster at me, you know? And I'm like, that's it actually in the book too. There's actually a lot of little tidbits that somebody who has been there would recognize right away.
Nice.
I wanted to put that in there, and I'm doing that with the second book too. Local little tidbits that somebody would go, okay, that guy,
Yeah.
that really, I know
That's
exactly what he's
authentic.
talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
What was it
exactly.
like? Because yeah, a lot of law enforcement doesn't deploy. They don't go over to
Right,
the job is here,
right,
but you do a lot of stuff. You're out there in the field all the time. What was it
right.
like for you, like actually deploying and leaving the country and going and doing your job in a foreign land?
It was really, really very strange. It was, um, I mean, it was just a life changing experience in a lot of ways. You know, I, the first month I was there, I was living in a transient tent,
Hmm.
on a cot. And I was by myself because all the guys I deployed with had all been moved out to different fobs all over the place. And so now I'm by myself, and you can't get any sleep in a transient tent because all these people are coming in all the time. In the middle of the night, they're coming in. And the first month was just Oh god, it was awful. And it's just, it's also an adjustment because I've never been in the military,
Mhm.
and and, trying to learn army speak
Yeah.
and, learn about, what they're trying to do and figure out what they're trying to do. And it's just a different culture, but, it was the experience of a lifetime. I didn't get to do as much as I would have liked to have done. I was supposed to go to Actually, I was supposed to go to a fob, in Solder outside of Solder City, right next to Solder City, called Iron Eagle, I think it was called. And, the last minute, the in-country management, which, by the way, I never mention the company. I never talk about the company. I just say the outfit or,
Yeah.
whatever, the unit
Sure.
I work. Anyway, they decided because I was a task force commander that I needed to be in a more of a management role, and so they kept me in the position at 10th Mountain, and I had like 10 or 12 other advisors in southern Iraq that reported to me, and computers never worked,
Wow. Yeah.
telephones never worked,
Welcome to
nothing
the
ever
government.
worked.
Yeah.
Exactly, nothing ever worked, and it was amazing to me, you know. Uh, I mean, I seen pictures from my dad was in World War II in the Pacific, and I've seen a few pictures, and and of course watching movies and documentaries and all that stuff. And then you go to a place like that, and everybody's living in trailers and connexes,
Yeah.
and there's these massive generators, as big as half the size or full size of a container,
Oh, yeah, they're massive.
and yeah, and all this stuff, and armored MRAPs and Jervs and up armored Humvees parked in these fields for as far as the eye can see. It's like, holy shit!
Yeah, you don't realize
we,
how big the
oh,
military
oh,
it really
unbelievable.
is until you see it up
Yeah,
close,
yeah, it's
and
really true.
you take a different look at it. Like um, the first time I used to walk by a display C5 when I was back in tech school.
Hmm.
We to get the chow every day from the schoolhouse. We had to walk past this mock flight line at Shepherd Air Force Base, where they had retired planes. I guess not retired, but they had planes that were there for
Right.
training purposes, and they had a C5 there, big white C5. So just massive plane. And it's a big plane, but it's an even bigger plane when they open up
Yeah.
both ends and you
Oh,
can see
yeah.
through
I
it and
can
you
only
realize, you know
imagine.
what? I could like play football in this.
Oh
It's
yeah.
huge.
Actually, my buddy from DOJ was, God, a senior flight chief, engineer, or whatever on C5s.
Okay, yeah.
Y I've never been able to figure out the chevron patterns on Air Force sleeves. It seems like it goes forever. It's like
Yeah.
this much, It's a lot, right?
When they start going on top, they're senior NCOs, they're senior.
Yeah, he had, like, a whole shit pot of them.
Oh yeah.
But he sent me pictures of the inside of one, the other day, and I was like, "Oh my." I flew on C-17s and,
Okay. See, that's nice.
C-130,
Oh.
and when I was at DOJ, on a C-141, that was hauling, would haul cargo, but it was also aerial refueler. And so I
Oh.
got to go in the back of the plane, and where they have the stinger and all of that. And it was pretty cool. That was fun. But the C-130 was an awful flight. It was an awful, awful flight. It was hotter than the blazes of hell. The
Hmm.
exhaust from the engines was coming into the passenger compartment. We were packed in on those red seats,
The jump seats, yeah.
elbow to elbow. I mean, not shit. Here's the guy sitting across from me. His knee was in between my legs. It was
Oh
like that,
yeah.
right?
They pack you
And
tight.
they packed me really tight, and they were all a bunch of young guys from the 101st. And I'm also in, you know, BDUs and the whole thing, weapon, all of it. But I don't have a rank insignia. It just says US on it, right?
Yeah.
And and they're all looking at me like, what's going on? And then one guy starts to throw up, and then another guy starts to throw up. And
Oh.
I'm like sitting there, and people are throwing up all around me, and sweat is pouring off. And I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to do? Do I throw up on my helmet? Do I throw up on the floor? Oh, fuck. I'm gonna die. This is gonna be so embarrassing. It was like the longest flight of my life,
Oh yeah.
to Kuwait, the Air Force base in Kuwait there in Kuwait City. Oh my god, it was awful. I couldn't get off of that plane fast enough. Oh,
Oh, I'm sure.
man.
Yeah, C-130s. That's a rough ride. I mean, they're they're just absolute animals when it comes
Yeah,
to doing what we need them to do,
they are.
and
They're
and
amazing.
and supporting the war. And of course, you got the gunship that has the howitzer outside it, and like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it's an absolute workhorse of an aircraft, but it's just the worst to fly in.
Oh, yeah. The other plane that is amazing too is the B-52. I just read the other day that they're gonna have a J model now, that they're gonna upgrade it to another put some more Wazoo stuff on it. The plane is like it's unbelievable. It's gonna be 100 years old. It's like
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
still kicking it.
Still kicking it, man. Nobody can haul iron like that thing can. It's
Oh no,
unbelievable.
no.
It's unbelievable.
Let's go
So,
back to Beverly
yeah.
Hills and let's talk
Uh-huh.
about that. You're an investigator in Beverly Hills. I imagine if
I was
there's
a
a place
detective,
on
yeah. Yeah.
a detective, if there's a place on Earth that is the most, it's got to be the most interesting place to be a detective. It's got to be Beverly Hills.
Yes, in some respects, yes. It's not a hotbed of crime with um, a homicide, like there are in certain divisions in LA City
Yeah,
or in the sheriff's area, but the crimes that occur in Beverly Hills have a different flavor to them. There's always, I mean, the frauds are always way more complicated because the sums of money are more complicated, the suspects are more complicated, the victims are more sophisticated, um, and uh, everything just has a little bit of a twist that makes it just a little bit different. Sometimes these victims would have, we used to talk about it. It was like, they have a private number to the White House.
yeah,
I mean that some of them do.
yeah,
Uh, and so um, you had to be smart. Beverly Hills PD. Really, in my experience, is a really fine organization, and they had some really top quality people. They hired really great people, and I worked with some really great guys, and everybody was pretty smart, and they understood the the subtle differences and you know. Things that you had to be aware of that you wouldn't necessarily have to be aware of in your average community in
yeah.
another place, obviously, so uh and certainly the Billionaire Boys Club case was a classic example of that because I was working auto theft at the time, auto theft, auto burglary, and this guy named Ron Levin was a victim of an auto burglary, wherein all of this sophisticated TV news gathering equipment, lights, cameras, audio, blah, 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 was stolen from his vehicle. And I'd conducted the investigation and identified the crook, who was the son of a extremely well-known acting family that goes back generations and generations, and he was a drug addict. And the interesting thing about it was my victim was the suspect in a fraud investigation the
Oh
next
wow,
table over to me because he had
wow,
scammed he but it gets way better. He had scammed the equipment out of a camera supply company, telling them that he was doing a documentary about news gathering and having, they call them stringers, people that are out there. They actually don't work for a network. They're like freelance. They go
okay,
out, they shoot shit, and then they sell it to the news outlets and all that stuff. Well, anyway, that's what he was kind of doing, a documentary about those people. That's what he told them he was doing. But collaterally with all of that, he was scamming the guys who were running the Billionaire Boys Club. And he had convinced them that he was going to invest in their harebrained investment scheme that they had. They had some investment strategy that they were convinced was going to be, brilliant and change everything. They were all middle class, upper middle class to extremely wealthy kids, boys, from families in Los Angeles. They all went to the same private school in LA, and they all thought that they were smarter than the average bear, and they were actually pretty stupid. But but so then they um, uh, they entered into some kind of arrangement with Ron, wherein they thought he had invested money with them, when in actual fact he had not, and so they came to collect, and that's how Ron was murdered. They
Oh,
forced him to sign a check on a Swiss bank account for like $1 million or something like that,
wow.
and then they kidnapped him and killed him, and dumped his body up in the mountains above LA. And but the interesting thing about that was there was no money in the account he wrote the check on. So joke's on you.
Yeah.
you know
Jeez.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the guy, he is a very gregarious guy. He would call me every single day and talk and BS about all kinds of stuff. He knew everybody, and if he didn't know everybody, he could convince you he knew everybody. And he was just a really fun guy to talk to, and he had all kinds of scams going on. He would call me and tell me that he would look at the newspaper, and this just occurred to me just now, that it's kind of funny. He would see where there was a story about a sonic boom somewhere. He would file a claim with the government for damage from the sonic boom from an Air Force jet or whatever being tested or something like that, and file a claim and get money from the government.
Wow. That's smart.
Oh yeah, the guy's brilliant. He was really brilliant, and
Jeez.
if he had used his brain power for for honest purposes, he probably would have been a multi-billionaire, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Could have changed the
But
world.
I think he enjoyed fooling people. I think he got off on it, and the crooks that killed him. I was part of the arrest team on that, and they're idiots. I mean, they left a notepad with a checklist of what to do related to the homicide, and
Mm.
they killed some other people too. This one other guy that was part of the conspiracy was a Persian kid, and his father was an Air Force general from the old government, from the Iran, from the Shah's government, and he was convinced that his father had millions of dollars, and so they were going to kidnap the father and torture him into signing over the money. And they put him in the trunk of a car and drove him from Northern California down to LA. Somewhere in between, he died he died of a heart attack or something in the trunk. Um, and oh yeah, I mean, and they had to do all of this because when they started this club, they rented offices, and they all got expensive suits, and they got toys and motorcycles and cars and all this crap, and they had no money to pay for it after they burned through all their seed money really fast, and like idiots, like dumb kids. And it was a fascinating case. And
Yeah.
the guy I worked with, who was the case lead investigator on it, passed away sadly a couple years ago. His name was Les Zoller, and he was an amazing detective. He was just a great detective, and he actually worked another big homicide case at Beverly Hills a few years later after I left, called the Menendez brothers case,
Oh, I
where
feel
two
like I've heard of
brothers.
that.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. That was the one where the two kids, also from a wealthy family, blasted their parents with shotguns that they had purchased, I think, from Big Five or someplace. Um, and while they were sitting there on the couch watching television, eating, strawberries and whipped cream, not really a pose that would make you think that the boys' lives were in danger as they're sitting there eating their dessert. But and then they promptly went out and bought Porsches and roll it, whatever, stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, anyway, that was that I wasn't involved in that case. I was long gone from that. I just, just was in kind of on the periphery talking to the guys who had been around for that. But yeah, it was a great place to work. Um,
I'm sure it
you
was
know,
interesting. I'm sure
it
it
was
was
very,
what,
very
6 years
interesting.
you said?
It's about 6 years, yeah.
Yeah.
People there were very, very supportive of the police. The community really took care of the police department, and the police department was very good to the community in terms of, you know, one of the things that I think is important when you measure a metric that you measure for an effectiveness for a police department is response time. In LA City, a typical response time can be 15, 20 minutes, 2, 3 hours. It depends.
Sure.
And in Beverly Hills, it was a couple minutes, 2, 3 minutes, so the cops will be there when you need them, and so that's important. And I think, as I said before, it was a very, very professional organization. It still is, I'm sure,
Yeah.
well, of course, all of my colleagues are now retired, so we're all old guys now. We're all reminiscing about the good old days when we carried wheel guns
Yeah. Yeah, that was a while ago.
a long time ago. Yeah, oh yeah, with two speed loaders,
Oh, wow, yeah, yeah.
and you were a
Let's
real gunslinger if you had four.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it. Let's talk about your book, Outside the
Uh-huh.
Wire.
Sure.
With his kind of a experienced career that you have and a very broad
Mhm.
career doing so much, um, why did you choose to do a thriller instead as opposed to maybe writing a biography, an autobiography, or something about all your experiences?
Well, um, I'll tell you, I had written a murder mystery script that was optioned a long time ago. Never got produced, but it was optioned.
Wow.
And so I kind of had the bug for writing fiction. I took a stab at writing another thriller, and just it I ended up walking away from it because sometimes you get going and you don't have a plan and you just write yourself into six corners and you just go, forget it,
Yep.
and you move on. The but and so while I was over there in Iraq, I was thinking, um, there might be something here that I could write about. And then we started we had a rash, and I know you know about this stuff, suicides on base.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of them, and I mean, insane. And then there was also an attempted murder at another fob in the area of my AOR, basically. And I thought, what if a guy like me, a retired detective with a million years on, kind of got brought into an investigation like a Agatha Christie case, 10 Little Indians, multiple murders, right? So I had that idea in my head while I was there. I'll never forget it. Actually came to me as I was walking back to my hooch, dragging my poor carcass over the gravel to get
Hmm.
back. And it popped into my head because I just heard about yet another suicide at dinner that evening. And so when I redeployed back home, I started penciling it out, and I thought, you know what? This isn't. I'm not Agatha Christie. This isn't going to be an Agatha Christie book. This is going to be a murder investigation, terrorism thing, and that's what it is. It is the title of the book. Outside the Wire, a novel of murder, love, and war, and that is exactly what it is. It begins with a murder, and my hero Rick Sutherland, a retired LAPD lieutenant, who had worked Major Crimes Division, which is the anti-terrorism unit, um, uh, is is the guy who is operating in a similar fashion to what I was doing. And he, along the way, meets a lovely army doctor, and they strike up a friendship. perhaps in violation of General Order Number One, which was another weird thing that they had over there,
Hmm.
and they together sort of unravel the murder, which turns out to be there's two murders of uh, persons who are cooperating, informants, and it turns out that they have bumped into a major terrorist plot, which they have to unravel as they move forward. It's written in the first person. It's Rick's voice,
Okay.
and there's a lot of humor, and there's uh, there's some hair-raising combat, so to speak,
Yeah.
and it's got all of the elements in it that are described in the cover, basically. So yeah, it's a interesting story.
Do you do you think you would have wrote the book if you hadn't deployed?
No, I probably would have written something else. I mean, this was such a see. Here's the thing that I think makes the book so special and different is there are a million books that are stories about guys overseas
Yeah.
deploying and their stories and their experiences,
Yep.
biographies, narratives, and also fiction. Okay, but all of them are the POV of either mostly serving military members or occasionally spooks, right?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes case officers and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
None of them are from civilian cops. And civilian cops have a whole different way of looking at this
Yeah.
because, when I go over there and I'm embedded with 10th Mountain Division, and I go to a division targeting meeting, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be cool. I'm going to hear about blowing up bad guys and all this cool stuff. And they're talking about chickens and irrigation and feeding goats and blah 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 blah. I'm going, what the hell is going on here? What is this? See, because that's the cop in me. It's like, let's go get the bad guys. Why are we doing this stuff, right? And so that is, and so it's like the two worlds collide in that sense because, you know, my character probably to a certain degree, I'm sort of like that too. Is like lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get the bad guys. You're either gonna come with me or just get out of my way because I'm going to get them. And that's sort of the way Rick operates. And of course, as you know, the military is probably the biggest bureaucracy there is.
Sure is.
And so there's a lot of there's a lot of conflict that is inherent with that. And of
Yep.
course, he's not
Hurry
from
up and
around
wait.
there. He doesn't yeah, he doesn't speak the lingo. So I thought that that would be a very interesting different way to tell the story,
Yeah.
to tell a war story from the eyes of a civilian
Yeah.
who has never been in the service, has no idea half the time what the hell they're even talking about. You know, you know. I mean, there are a few times when I actually turn to the reader, I break the wall and turn to the reader and say, I have no idea what they just said. I mean, because of the acronyms and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And sexy combined explosives exploitation cell,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
CEXCE.
Yeah,
I'm like,
they've made
I
some
can't
good
make this
ones
up.
up. Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't make it up.
I've heard some good ones, and I've heard some ones that I was
Oh,
like, man, that was a stretch. That
yeah,
was a stretch.
exactly. I
Like
know.
they were trying hard to make that one work, and it just wasn't going to. Like,
There's like this cell in the Pentagon, full of all these O4s and O5s coming up with acronyms.
oh
It's
yeah,
like,
oh yeah, just coming up with ideas left and right because it's got to
yeah,
sound decent. It
yeah,
can't sound
exactly.
like it. It can't sound. It's like we call dinosaurs by a stage name essentially
Right,
because
right,
nobody can pronounce the scientific name. So you gotta
exactly.
you gotta come up with something that's a little
It's something
easier
that
on
you
the
could
ears.
exactly, exactly. Dumb it down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's sort of that's kind of why I wrote that. Like, and I thought it would be an interesting and different story to
Mhm.
tell.
Is
And
there going to be a book two?
I'm working on it now.
Okay.
It takes place about 2 years later, and primarily in Los Angeles, although it begins overseas in Europe. And the title is World Way, and which is the street that LAX is located on.
Mm,
And um, basically, my two main protagonists, Rick and Nancy. Nancy being the army doctor, and Rick are back, as well as several other people that were part of the original story. And it's a particularly pressing because the bad guys in this tale are MOIS and IRGC, you know, Iranian intelligence and the Quds Force
mhm.
bad guys and all their playmates. So with everything happening right now, I think it's kind of prescient, which means I need to finish the damn thing. The other thing about this book is that something that I had to deal with for my career is the aspect of mental health,
Mm,
because both Rick and Nancy were exposed to some pretty hair raising, pretty awful things, and in the first book. And Nancy, being a physician and being a woman and being smart and in tune, gets help. Rick, of course, being a knuckle dragging cop, doesn't.
yeah.
And then suddenly one day he realizes, oh crap, I'm in trouble. I need to do something about this.
Yes.
And story too is post traumatic stress and dealing with that, and that actually manifests itself early on in the book at a critical juncture when he has to defend his life, and so um, that is something that I had to deal with, and so I thought, why not put that in the book too? Because I think it makes it adds a little more realism to it. That's one thing about Rick is he's not Mitch Rapp, he's not James Reese. He's Rick Sutherland, LAPD lieutenant, 50 something year old retired guy,
Yeah.
with, you know, and he's not a superhero. He's nobody to mess with, but he's no superhero either.
Right. Well, I think that's
And
what makes characters interesting when
right,
they don't necessarily fit the mold and they
right,
got the quirks about them that makes them a little different. It
yes,
makes you want to know more about them. Like, what's this 50-year-old guy doing out here beating the streets? He should be keeping
yeah,
drinking Mai Tais or whatever by the pool. So I think
exactly,
that's a
exactly,
level of and that's character development is so important. You gotta
yes,
one have a likable character, but two they have to be interesting. So there's got to be something about them that is interesting, and it's easy when you put a character in a situation that they shouldn't be in. You can do a lot with that.
yeah, really, the old duck out of water principle, and
Hmm.
that's sort of what he's been in, and the reception I got from the characters, people would come up to me and women especially, which was really cool because this is not necessarily a genre that women are attracted to
Yeah,
frequently,
that's true.
and and it's resonated very well with women, and which has made me very happy. And that I think also is because I have some very, very strong female characters in Outside the Wire, and in the next book I have even more, and both good and bad. And so I think that was part of it too. But people would come up to me and say, you know, I can hear your voice. When I'm reading this, I'm reading Rick say something, but I hear your voice. That's your voice, blah 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 blah. And the other thing is they want more. They wanted more of Rick. So I thought, well, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
More pain.
Yeah, you have to get that second one done.
Yeah, exactly. I really do. I need to buckle down on that.
Well, before
But
I let you go, let me
yeah,
get to a question that Jeff Circle from the dossier had for you.
uh
Uh,
huh,
Me and Jeff are doing a little thing this year where we're kind of cross promoting each other, and
sure,
he's going to save a question from his dossier for each guest that I have on here. So
okay,
I'll let it rip right here. Um, After a long and epic career in different California law enforcement agencies, you retired and went to Iraq in 2008 to work counterterrorism. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like to join the military first and then go into police work?
Absolutely, 1,000%, and I wish I had. And
Really?
I'll recount, yes, absolutely, and I'll tell you a funny story. When I was a cadet at Culver City, I was working with this guy who was a police officer, he was a reserve officer, and he had just gotten out in the Army, he was an MP, and he was talking to me about going back. He was gonna go back in, and that I should go back in and enlist and be an MP. And my dad retired '08, right? So he's been around the block a few times. So I sat down with him and talked about it with him, and I will never forget that conversation as long as I live. He said, and this was in 1977, 78. He said, "Son," he said, "the peacetime military sucks." And of course, back then in the '70s, it really sucked. It was really bad. And he said, "The peacetime military sucks." He said, "If you're going to go in as an officer, finish your college." I was in college at the time. "Finish your college and then go in as an officer."
Mhm.
And I saluted smartly and said, "Okay, you're the boss. You know
Yeah.
better than I do."
Yeah, he
you know?
does.
So, yes, I actually do. I've worked with a lot of veterans over my career, tons and tons of veterans. And I think from a life experience standpoint, I think it's a very, very valuable thing. I wish, that, that it was something that was mandatory in this country. I just got back from a trip to Turkey and Greece, and in Turkey, it's mandatory conscription. And Turkey, of course, has the largest military in NATO, and they're very impressive. Uh, and um, and I have to think that that has something that builds their character of their and discipline of their citizenry, like it would here in this country. We have a lot of young
Yeah.
people in this country who have never experienced true adversity, have no idea what real teamwork is like, or having somebody else's life depend on your actions and your life depend on somebody else's actions and all of those things. And I think that that is something that is a good thing. And like I said, I kind of wish that I had experienced that, you know. I'm kind of glad though wasn't an MP in the army though, because I worked with a guy later on who was an MP in the army at that exact same time, and it didn't sound like it was that much fun.
It's still not. I,
Yeah,
I I know MPs today that no,
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
changed. It still
Nobody
sucks.
and nobody likes you. Nobody likes you at all, right?
Oh,
It's like,
the cops are coming.
yeah, they're gonna, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, and then they got nothing to do but stop guys on base for 2 miles over the speed limit and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm glad I didn't do that, but I do wish I had done it. I really do. Because I grew up around. We went when I was a kid. We used to go to the Navy base in Long Beach. So this was in the '60s during the Vietnam War, and I get the 25, 50 cent haircuts from the Filipino barbers and ate in the commissary and all that stuff. Saw the young Marines there waiting to ship out and everything. So I kind of grew up around the military, always
Yeah.
been fascinated by it, studied it, read, big military history guy, blah, 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 blah. So it would follow that I would be attracted to that and want to do that. But dad gave me advice to continue with my education, and then eventually it ended up in police work. So, which is quasi-military, but a little different.
Yeah, still, it's especially in some of the stuff that you did, the counterterrorism, and I can't imagine what
Right.
counterterrorism in LA was like, especially all the way from Monterey all the way down to San Diego. I mean, it has
Yeah.
a lot to do with the U.S. Mexican border too. I'm sure it's not probably what it is today, but um, I'm sure it was still an issue.
Actually, I didn't go all the way to the border. We helped the San Diego team, but
Okay.
but you're right. But actually, the border was porous then too. in many ways. We had tunnels, we had all kinds of. The border has always been a train wreck for a long time, and I mean, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that if you're a bad guy and you want to come in the United States, you're going to go through an airport and have to get screened and photographed and have your biometrics recorded and everything else, or do you smuggle yourself across the border posing as a Guatemalan or a whatever?
Yeah.
I pick Plan B if I'm a bad guy,
Yeah.
and that's what
Absolutely.
they do, and that's what
That's
they
why it's a
do.
problem.
Exactly. It's a huge security problem. And we are entering into a very, very perilous time period, I believe. You know, um, with the threat of terrorism, and it's not necessarily going to be something that's going to be ordered directly from Tehran, but it it could be somebody who is inspired by that, inspired by radicalized teachings or whatever, and does bad things like Major Nadal Hassan or somebody else,
Hmm.
one of those guys. So yeah, it's an interesting time we live in.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I want you to tell
Yeah,
everybody where they can go find more about you, your book, and stay kind of caught up on the news so they can catch book
sure.
two as well.
Okay, sure. Okay. Outside the wire, I saw one of your guests do this. I went, "That's a good idea. I need to do that."
Yeah. Yeah. This is your chance. This is your two
Exactly.
minutes. Promote
Exactly.
yourself.
Exactly. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and my website is GaryEdgingtonAuthor.com. My Instagram is G Edgington Books, and I got my Facebook back finally after it got hacked.
Oh,
So
I was like,
it's
are you in
Gary Edgington.
jail? Did you get yourself
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Facebook jail?
No, major denial of service hack by a very sophisticated bad guy. Really
Wow.
bad. Yeah, it was specifically targeting me. Yeah, it was real. It was not good. But anyway, got it back, and it's Gary Edgington author on Facebook or Gary Edgington, either one. I have two. Uh, I have Twitter, but I never use it. you know,
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure
it's one of those platforms that's hit or miss with people.
exactly. And I barely have time to do all the stuff I'm supposed to do anyway, as with as a debut novelist,
Hmm.
all of that. Yeah, as you
Yeah.
talk to all these people all the time. It's so interesting. Everybody, when I listen to your guests talk, it's like, oh yeah, I know about that. I know about that problem. Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
exactly what he's talking about. I've heard that so
Hmm.
many times.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
many
Everybody's
times.
got
Yeah.
this. There's not enough. There's too much to do and not enough time to do it in.
Oh, completely. Completely. That is for sure. That is for sure. But yeah. But I thank you so much for having me on. I'm
Yes,
honored
thank
to be
you.
on your show, and no, I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
Yes,
So,
sir. Well, thank you again, and I'm glad we got
hey,
to do
take
this. I
care.
know we were kind of juggling schedules back in
Sure.
December, so I'm glad it
Yeah,
kind of
me
freed
too.
up and worked out. So this was great. And again, thank you.
Yeah,
Everybody needs to go pick up the book Outside the Wire. Of course, there's
thank
plenty of
you.
great stories that and little Easter eggs that you got in there that you got to go
Yes, there
check
are
out.
Easter eggs. There is a whole basket full of Easter eggs.